Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda with another important update from Ignition Time where I go over some additional comments from the US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in today's interview on Fox Business. He said some very interesting things that have never really been discussed before. I'm going to go over 4 things that he discussed and I'm going to break them down for you, analyze them for you, read between the lines and actually show you the clip side by side so you can judge for yourself. Secretary Mnuchin said, number 1, we cannot force people to participate in the payroll tax deferral, and he also said this will not impact Social Security. Number 2, he said the economic policies are working and he said that people are very encouraged. Number 3, he said, let's do this, Democrats. Let's get everyone back to the table. We do not have to do everything back at once. And number 4, he said something that I thought was incredible, and I believe this has never ever been reported before. He said that initially the administration considered doing $400 a week, $600 a week, $800 a week in different parts of the country. And he said that would not be fair. So let's get into the key comments from the Treasury Secretary and let's analyze this interview in more detail. So Mnuchin was specifically asked, where is the money going to come from? Let's say you defer the payroll taxes or you have a payroll tax holiday. How are things actually going to get paid? What is actually going to happen? And he said, we are going to create a level of certainty for employers to participate because the administration does want employers to participate so that individuals can go home with larger paychecks, individuals earning less than $100,000 a year, which by the way happens to be a large section of the individuals who've been impacted by the economy, and a significant portion of those individuals are going to participate and play a key role in the November election. So now he said something that was extremely important. He said, and I quote, we cannot force people to participate. In other words, businesses cannot be forced to participate in the payroll tax holiday. And I did allude to this earlier. If a business is not sure that, hey, if I don't pay the payroll taxes, I'm going to have to pay it at some point in the future, they may simply continue paying payroll taxes. But then if a business decides not to pay payroll taxes and they essentially withhold it, now, when do they have to pay it? Because the business doesn't want to get into trouble or get fines and penalties from the IRS. So some specific guidelines about this will probably be issued soon by the administration, but a lot of employers will simply continue paying payroll taxes. I can tell you, for me personally, I have US-based employees and we'll continue paying payroll taxes because as far as I'm concerned, I just don't want to. For me, it's not clear. So we're just going to continue paying it. And I'm sure a lot of other companies will continue paying payroll taxes as well, which by the way, then defeats the purpose of the payroll tax holiday by the administration. So there is a bit of a gray area there about what's going to happen. Am I going to have to, as an employer, even as an employee, am I going to have to then pay those payroll taxes come December, come January? And if you have that concern, then, you may want to simply continue paying the payroll taxes. So Mnuchin said, we cannot force people to participate, but I think many small businesses will do this and pass on the benefits. I think, the president would like to do a payroll tax cut, so he'll go back to Congress when he wins the election and ask Congress to have this money forgiven and have the Social Security Trust Fund fully topped up in such a way that it does not impact Social Security. So I thought that was very interesting. Secretary Mnuchin in one segment talked about the payroll tax holiday potentially becoming permanent if the president gets reelected, and Social Security getting funded from the general, what he said, from the trust fund, from the general fund, if you will. So the Social Security Trust Fund money would get topped up from what he mentioned earlier as the general fund. Now, I don't know, and I'm not exactly clear where that money will come from. He hasn't talked about that, but let's watch what the Treasury Secretary said about this. Let's roll the tape.
How does that money get generated if not through this tax cut? Where does the money come from to replace it?
Well, we're going to create a level of certainty for employers that want to participate. We can't force people to participate, but I think many of small businesses will do this and pass on the benefits. I think, the president would like to do a payroll tax cut, so he'll go back to Congress when he wins the election and ask Congress to have this money forgiven and have the Social Security Trust Fund fully topped up so that in no way does this impact Social Security.
Now, in the next segment of the interview, the secretary was asked, are things working? Are things actually getting better? Where does the country stand right now? And he did project a very optimistic tone. He said that the economic policies are working. Individuals are very encouraged. In fact, he said, we literally shut down the entire economy. It's like a water faucet. It's like taking a faucet and turning it off. And he said that has an enormous economic impact. And he said, now as we safely start to reopen the economy, he said the entire economy, the numbers were dreadful earlier, and now you'll start to see the numbers increase. He said, we've been bringing back a lot of jobs. The economic policies are working. And he said the previous legislation is working. He's talking about the CARES Act, the stimulus checks, the Paycheck Protection Program, the Main Street Lending Program, the economic injury disaster loans, all the things that were a part of the CARES Act. And I do believe that a lot of those measures were very timely. It's just unfortunate that now things have deteriorated into a lot of partisan bickering. And in the words of the Senate Majority Leader, now is not as serious as it was back then. Those are his words, okay? But regardless, there are individuals who need help, and I hope we can put all of this partisan bickering to an end. He said, there are things we'd like to do with additional legislation. And he said, we are going to see very good numbers between now and the end of the year. And he said, if the Democrats can be reasonable and put politics aside, it'll be good for American workers and the American people. We'll continue this expansion. The president wants to make sure every single person that lost their job because of the pandemic gets it back. And he said the president had the best economy we've ever had prior to the pandemic. So this is an optimistic picture from the White House because, again, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin does speak for the White House. Let's roll the tape and see what he had to say in his own words.
Well, Maria, you just have to put this in perspective because this is unlike any other economic situation we've ever had. And that is because as a result of COVID, we literally shut down the entire economy. It's like taking a water faucet and turning it off. And obviously, when that occurs, it has an enormous economic impact. We've never shut down voluntarily the entire economy before. So there's no question that the numbers in the second quarter were dreadful. And as we now safely reopen the economy, you see the numbers increase. And that's why you've seen we've brought back a lot of jobs. The economic policies are working. The previous legislation is working, helping small businesses, helping employers. And, you know, we're making a lot of progress on vaccines and virals. I think people are very encouraged by that. And as you see the economy reopen, I think you're going to see very good numbers between now and the end of the year. Now, having said that, there are things that we'd still like to do with additional legislation, and if the Democrats can be reasonable and put politics aside, this will be good for American workers and the American economy, and will continue this expansion. And the president wants to make sure every single person that lost their job because of COVID gets it back. Let me just remind you, the president had the best economy we've ever had when we started this before COVID.
Now, in the next segment of the clip, the Treasury Secretary highlighted the differences in approaches between the Democrats and the Republicans. Like I mentioned, the Republicans are fiscally more conservative and the Democrats want a whole bunch more money. In fact, now with Vice President Joe Biden's pick with Kamala Harris, who, by the way, wanted a $2,000 a month payment to Americans during the pandemic. And by the way, the Biden campaign has not commented on that. You can see that there's a clear difference in ideologies between the two sides, and that's going to play a big role leading up to the November election. So he said, we have injected, this is what Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said, we have injected 20% of our GDP back into the economy, or we will inject, because he's counting the $1 trillion proposal that they have now, in addition to the $3 trillion in the CARES Act, which totals $4 trillion, which is 20% of the US GDP, which is $20 trillion. He said that that's an extraordinary number. And my point to the Democrats and the Republicans is, well, let's do this. This will be the fifth bill. We can always come back in the year or in January and do a sixth bill. We do not need to do everything all at once. And he said the Democrats started at 3.5 trillion. And he said they had a lot of stuff there that was unnecessary. And he said that, I can't figure out. And he said that they've been bouncing around so much at their numbers. He's not exactly sure where they are right now. And he said, our view is let's spend over $1 trillion on the areas of the economy that are going to be impacted now so that we can agree on it. And allocation of the money in an intelligent way is always a better idea than just, sort of dropping money across the country in an inconsistent way, in a haphazard way. So the allocation of the funds needs to be precise no matter what. So he said now is the time to have bipartisan support to help our kids go back to school, to help small businesses, hospitals, rental assistance, airports, broadbands, vaccines. These are all things that are critical to the American public. And as opposed to bickering, let's get money to work now. He said we need to come back and do more work together. So let's watch. In the words of the Treasury Secretary, let's roll the tape.
Well, Maria, we've already put $3 trillion into the economy. A lot of it has not made its way in, so it'll continue to put money in. With a little over another $1 trillion, we will have injected 20% of our GDP back into the economy. And that's really an extraordinary number. And my point to the Democrats and the Republicans are, let's do this. This will be the fifth bill. we can always come back later in the year or in January and do a sixth bill. We don't need to do everything at once. Now, the Democrats started at $3.5 trillion, which had everything in there, including lots of stuff that was nothing to do with COVID. They then increased their offer by another couple of $100 billion. So I actually think it got closer to $4 trillion. And now they've offered to take $1 trillion off. So I can't quite figure out whether we're at $2.5 trillion or $3 trillion. But our view is, let's spend a little over $1 trillion on areas of the economy that are going to be very impactful now that we can agree on. And if we need to do more, we'll come back and do more and work together. But now is the time to have bipartisan support to help our kids go to school safely, to help our small businesses, to help our hospitals, to help rental assistance, airports, broadband, vaccines. These are all things that are critical to the American public. And as opposed to bickering about whether there's enough money, let's get money to work now.
And in the final segment of this interview, which I thought was the most telling aspect of the interview, he was specifically asked about the $600 a week, which is now $400 a week, down from $400 down to $300 a week. And he was specifically asked how they came up with that number. Now, as you might expect, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin compared that with the $25 a week top up that the Obama administration had offered and said, hey, we're doing a whole lot more. But he said something that was very, very telling. He said that when the faucet was closed, and he's referring to the economy, and the $600 was an average number across the country, we knew in certain places it would be too high and in certain places it would be too low. In other words, they implemented it back in March because it was an emergency. It was a public health emergency. It still is. And there was bipartisan support, and they just rolled it out so that people would get help. But he said, we knew that was and he said that in some places it was too high, too low. And he also said, we contemplated, this is the first time I've ever heard him say this. He said, in his own words, we contemplated doing $400, $600 or $800 in different parts of the country. And he said that we thought that that wouldn't be fair because it would impact different places differently from the federal government. So it's clear that if they did it differently, some parts of the country would get more money, some parts of the country would get less money. Presumably, individuals in states with a higher standard of living, this is just my assumption, individuals in states like New York, California would get more, individuals in states with a lower cost of living would get less, but that would create a fundamental unfairness. People would say, hey, why am I getting less money in unemployment benefits simply because of where I live? So that's presumably why, amongst other factors, implementation probably would have been a big nightmare. Presumably, those were the factors that prompted the administration to say, hey, let's just make it the same number throughout the country. At that point in time, it was $600. So Steven Mnuchin said that that's going to be a short-term issue. He said that when we came back with the more recent proposal of $200, he said that was about 75% wage replacement for most people. Because remember, $300 a week is the average unemployment benefit from the state. So that's where they said that, $200 would be a fair number. But he said the president agreed to go higher, which is how they ended up with that $400 number. And he said that's why the president put that in the executive action. And he also said that between $200 and $600, $400 was a compromise, and that's where the president settled. So he said instead of the Democrats basically saying, don't give anything to anybody unless we can get exactly what we want, the president wanted to move forward with a very fair proposal. So let's watch the clip from Steven Mnuchin and let's see what he had to say about the unemployment benefits and about the administration's consideration to have different unemployment benefits for different parts of the country. Let's watch.
Well, Maria, let me just put this in perspective. During the financial crisis under Obama, the federal government had a $25 top-up. So when we sat down and negotiated with the Democrats, we shut down the entire economy. So we knew that unemployment was going to be a problem. And we thought this was going to be for a short period of time. Well, I said, well, the water faucet was closed. And the $600 was an average number across the entire country. And we knew in certain places it would be too high, in certain places it would be too low. And we contemplated doing $400, $600, $800 in different parts of the country. We thought that that wouldn't be fair because it would impact different places differently from the federal government. But we knew that was a short-term issue. Now, when we came back with the $200 is about 75% of wage replacement for the majority of the people. But the president agreed to go higher. We thought a very fair compromise was $400. And that's why the president put that in the executive action. And that's why we're moving forward with that. And, $200, $400, $600, $400 is a compromise. So instead of the Democrats basically saying, don't give anybody anything unless we can get exactly what we want, the president wants to move forward with a very fair proposal.
So there you have it, everybody. Words from the U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin about the administration actually considering different unemployment benefits at different with different parts of the country. So he said specifically that they considered $400, $600, and $800 in different parts of the country, but they decided not to do that because it wasn't fair. Now think about this. This would presumably mean that some states would get $800 a week as a booster and some states would get $400 a week as a booster. This obviously would create a lot of problems. This would create a lot of complaints. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think a flat rate, like it's been the $600 in the past and like it is now, the $400 a week, do you think that that flat rate makes sense? Or do you think 400, 600, 800 a week booster, depending on where you live, would have made more sense because of the standard of living? So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something new, please click the like button below. Please subscribe and please enable notifications so you get instant updates from me going forward. I really appreciate you watching. We release videos at 2 p.m. East Coast time most days of the week, so make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Also, if you want to get breaking news and alerts from our channel, get your cell phone out, type out the word ignition or type out the word time, and then send a text message to 70,000. That's 70000, and you'll get added to our breaking news and alerts list, and you can opt out at any point in time that you want. Also, you can get added to our email list if you agree to a quick disclaimer, and you can opt out of that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Please click like below if you appreciate our efforts in creating this content for you. And also please subscribe and please enable notifications. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Bye.